As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
I just watched the State of the Union, basically recording this right after watching, and there wasn't too much foreign policy. He started on Ukraine. He said a bunch of nonsense about that. The biggest thing was his claim that Putin's not going to stop in Ukraine. He's going to keep going into Europe, which is just total nonsense. And he said, pass the aid. And so earlier in the day on Thursday, it came out that Biden was going to announce this U.S. military mission to establish a temporary pier in Gaza to get more aid into the Strip. And this is as Palestinians are starving to death and Israel is still restricting aid. And this measure is being ordered instead of Biden using the enormous leverage that he has over Israel to pressure them to allow in more aid or just halt this genocidal campaign altogether. But he's not doing that. They're going to do this pier project, and they also started these airdrops of aid, which is really, just a PR ploy to make it look like the U.S. is doing something while they're the ones providing the bombs and all the support to the military that's starving these people to death. So Biden said at the State of the Union, quote, "Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the Gaza coast that can receive large ships carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters," end quote. U.S. officials told Axios earlier in the day that the pier in the sea off the Gaza coast will allow hundreds of aid trucks to enter the Strip per day, but the pier will take weeks to build. It's not clear how long exactly, but at least a few weeks, and Palestinians are already starving to death at a rapid rate. Biden insisted that there would be no U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza as a result of this operation, but of course, the plan does run the risk of U.S. personnel being targeted off the coast of Gaza, which of course, if that happens, who knows what would happen next, the escalation that would be next after that. So the aid will pass through Cyprus before heading to the pier and will be subject to Israeli inspections, which means some could be turned away. So CNN reported the other day that just examples of items that Israel is turning away, is rejecting from allowing into the Gaza Strip. And that includes anesthetics and anesthesia machines, oxygen cylinders, ventilators, and water filtration systems. The report said that other items that have faced restrictions include dates, sleeping bags, medicines to treat cancer, water purification tablets, and maternity kits. So these are the types of things that Israel is restricting. So if Israel has the ability to turn these shipments away, what's going to stop them? The Ukrainian president is going to appoint General Valery Zaluzhny, Ukraine's former commander-in-chief, as the ambassador to the UK. So Zelensky removed Zaluzhny from his post as a top general on February 8th, and the two have been at odds over the disastrous war with Russia for years. Zaluzhny has long been rumored to be a potential candidate once Ukraine has presidential elections again, and Zelensky's move to send him to the UK is seen as an effort to keep him from domestic politics. So Ukraine's foreign ministry announced this on Thursday, and then Zelensky said that Zaluzhny told him that he wants to go the diplomacy route after being the commander-in-chief. So he's saying, they've been acting cordial publicly since Zelensky removed him. It wasn't clear exactly how Zaluzhny was going to respond. But this news actually came after there was a poll in Ukraine released that found Zelensky would lose to Zaluzhny in a presidential election, lose pretty badly. The poll found that 41% would vote for 41% would vote for Zaluzhny in a first-round election, while only 23.7% would vote for Zelensky. So he's a real political threat. And Ukraine was due to hold presidential elections on March 31st of this month, but they have been delayed as Zelensky continues to extend martial law. Under Ukraine's constitution, a vote cannot be held in Ukraine under martial law, but Zelensky previously said it was possible if Western countries paid him enough money, but he's since dropped that idea. So while the idea that the Biden administration, all the Russia hawks in the U.S. are selling this proxy war as a fight for democracy, the U.S. has not pushed Zelensky to hold elections, and parliamentary elections that were scheduled for last fall have also been delayed. Sweden officially joined NATO on Thursday, becoming the 32nd member of the Cold War-era alliance, which had 16 members when the Soviet Union dissolved. By joining NATO, Sweden has officially abandoned its centuries-old policy of neutrality that kept the country out of 2 world wars, sparing it the destruction that most European nations faced. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and Secretary of State Antony Blinken made Stockholm's membership official in Washington. Christensen was also due to visit the White House, and he attended Biden's State of the Union as a guest of honor. So Blinken said, quote, "This is a historic moment for Sweden. It's historic for the alliance. It's historic for the transatlantic relationship. Our NATO alliance is now stronger, larger than it has ever been," end quote. So the U.S. and Sweden, they've already signed a new military agreement that gives the U.S. access to multiple bases in Sweden. The U.S. signed a similar deal with Finland, which became NATO's 31st member last year. And Finland shares an over 800-mile border with Russia. And of course, Russia is beefing up its military in Western Russia in response to this. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said on Wednesday, quote, "Against the background of a buildup of NATO's military potential near the Russian borders, the expansion of the alliance through the accession of Finland and in the future Sweden, we have taken steps to strengthen the groupings of troops in the northwestern and western strategic directions," end quote. At the end of the Cold War, the U.S. and its allies told the Russians that NATO would not be expanded east of Germany and that they could therefore not offer NATO membership to Poland and the other countries to the east. So this was not put in any treaty, and the U.S. and its NATO allies broke this promise made in these conversations and expanded and made an enemy out of post-Soviet Russia when they didn't have to. And of course, all of this was a huge factor in Putin's decision to invade, the NATO promise for Ukraine, and all that.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
China splurges on gold for a 16th month. This is from Bloomberg. As prices hit records. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Gold today is $2,160 per ounce. No surprise to Trends Journal subscribers. Here's one of your top trends for 2024. You got it. Golden days. A golden year for gold. It's just the beginning. Oh, and you know why gold prices are going up? Because everything is so nice in the world, and it's a safe haven asset, and everybody feels so safe and secure with the Israel war expanding and the Ukraine war. Keep trying to heat that up. But the big bottom line is what we said, and now they're saying it. The Fed's going to lower interest rates this year in the run-up to the presidential reality show. And that's all it is. It's a shit show. I like Trump. I like Biden. Fuck off. I don't like any of them. Do what you want to do. I don't tell you what to do. Don't tell me what to do. And hate me because I don't swallow your shit. Okay? So they want to keep Ms. Fatsabrut there, Janet Yellen, the former Fed head, as Treasury Secretary. So they're going to do everything they can because the Feds are running the government. Got it? There is real concern among a lot of people in a lot of nations. And by the way, you're also seeing other countries as well, according to the World Gold Council. Central banks bought 1,037 tons of gold last year, just shy of the all-time high of 2022, and it's going to a new high this year. There's a strong case for record buying by countries including China, Poland, and others, it goes on to say. And there are a number of central banks buying a combined total of 1,000 tons a year. They know how bad things are going to get. So again, we don't tell you what to do. We give you our trends analysis and our trend forecasts, and you know the deal. Think for yourself. This is really hardly reported in the media today. You go to CNBC, it's nothing anywhere that's coming up much. U.S. trade deficit widened in January, but more than forecast. Yep, it's up 5.1%. So we're buying more, selling less. Everything is perfect. The markets are going up. It's great. Moving on. Nordstrom shares fall 10%. And what else do we have here? Victoria's Secret falls most ever. No, only down 28%. Foot Locker, they only lost 30%. Who else do we have over here? Hugo Boss isn't a boss anymore. Their stocks plunged 13% on pessimistic sales outlook. Again, we've been writing in the Trends Journal week after week about what's going on over here. And again, they're only reporting the highlights and not much of the lowlights. And it's going to go low because, you ready? Layoffs rise at the fastest rate for February since 2009. So this is Challenger Gray and Christmas. 2009, you mean at the height of the Great Recession, or as we called it, the Panic of 08. And I took that domain name out in 2007 and called it. Yep. A total of nearly 85,000 planned cuts showed an increase of 3% from January and 9% from the same month a year ago. Challenger experts say companies often cite restructuring plans. Yeah. That's bullshit. Oh, Pentagon claims economic bonanza for arming Ukraine. Isn't that great? The Ukraine conflict, and they go on to say that Austin, this Lloyd Austin, who formerly killed people in Iraq and in Afghanistan when he was in the United States military, General Austin. These investments have expanded, facilitated, and created jobs for American workers. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Sending our arms to go killing people and bragging that it's creating jobs. Again, in total disgust of 5-star General, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who warned that the military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. And ramping up the war, several were reported dead in an explosion at Iranian refinery. This just happened. They blew up gas pipelines a couple of weeks ago. Israel's ramping this war up. Of course, we don't know who did it yet, but we'll find out, of course. IDF carries out airstrikes against Hezbollah. Keeps ramping up. National Guard to be deployed in New York City subway in crime crackdown. Isn't that nice? Spending some $21 million to do it. You can check your bags. And that's going to be fun to go on the subway, night in Calcutta. Not one word in this article by ABC News that none of this existed before the COVID war. None of it. Crime was not where it is now. When people lose everything I said and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And we're losing it big time.
The corporate media lied too much, and it killed them. Biden quickly explained that actually his top priority has nothing to do with America. His top priority is sending billions more to Ukraine. A foreign war in Eastern Europe, a war across the world that has nothing to do with the United States, that the United States is not obligated by any treaty to join. Of course, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. A war that can only hurt this country and already has hurt it in grave and permanent ways. The invasion of Ukraine is the most important thing to Joe Biden. Not ending the invasion of our own country by drug cartels, which control huge swaths of the southern United States at this point. Not our degrading economy you experience every day. Not our collapsing schools where kids can't read at all. Not the 100,000 fentanyl deaths every year. Not the declining life expectancy that is obvious if you look around. Collapsing public health, an epidemic of suicide and murder, things that hurt Americans. Ghost armies of drug addicts living on the streets. Right outside the chamber where the speech was given tonight. None of that matters. Biden's top priority is aid for Ukraine. It was deranged. You watch this, you thought, this is insane. Does anyone in the room think it's insane? They must. Here's how the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, newly elected, the man who leads Republicans, in fact, the top elected Republican in the United States of America. Here's how he responded as Joe Biden told the country that the invasion of Ukraine is his top priority. Watch this.
Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that it needs to defend itself. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down.
This is crazy talk. There's no explanation of what the goal is here. There's lie after lie. Ukraine can stop Russia. No, it can't. This has gone on for over 2 years. NATO is stronger than ever. No, it's not. NATO is on its way to collapse, as is the economy of Western Europe. For not one sentence did Joe Biden explain what the goal of this exercise is, when we'll know we've won, and what the future should look like. Again, it was crazy talk. And yet, Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, nodded gravely. Oh, of course, he is completely on board with Joe Biden on this Biden's signature issue. And that's not a guess. As of this afternoon, Mike Johnson is secretly supporting Biden's agenda, sending another $60 billion to the oligarchs in Ukraine. Johnson plans to let Democrats onto the floor of the House to vote for this. This is a stealthy procedural move designed to shield him and other Republicans from criticism. Oh, the Democrats did it. But that's exactly what it is. He's the Speaker of the House. He could stop it, but he won't, because he's on board. So why is he on board? Is Mike Johnson representing his own voters as he backs Joe Biden's signature agenda item, a war against Russia? No, he's not. Republican voters in Louisiana are not for this. Republican voters nationally are not for this. They hate this. It has nothing to do with them. And it's insulting. As their country is invaded, we send billions to prevent the invasion of another country that we have nothing to do with? But the Uniparty demands this, so Mike Johnson is doing it. And so at some point you ask, well, why are they demanding this, actually? Why is war with Russia the most important thing? Could it be because they're getting rich from war? Well, that's certainly true. And there may be other reasons as well. We could guess. But we don't need to, because we know that it's happening, and we know that war against Russia is not the only war we're going to be engaged in, and not the only one that Biden announced tonight. Biden also told the country that we're going to have boots on the ground in Gaza. Really? Or admitted it, in fact. American forces have actually been there for months. Did you know that? Did anyone ask you? Has anyone explained to you, no matter where your sympathies lie, what the point of this is, when we'll know we've won? What's the objective here? American lives will be at risk. But of course, no one's told you. And of course, you already know the point. The point is to suck the United States into another foreign war that can't possibly help the United States, a war that can only hurt us and already is hurting us. And we're doing this not because it helps us, but because foreign interests are demanding that we do it. America is being used, as we so often have been. And the result of all of this is that the world is now closer to nuclear war at this moment than at any time in history, closer than it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We have no idea where this is going. You never do once people start to die, once wars begin. No PowerPoint can tell you, no speech to a joint session can tell you where this is going. It's dynamic. It's completely unpredictable. And that's why wise people pause before accelerating. But there are no wise people in charge in either party, on either side. You think Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, has any clue what will happen in a war with Russia? Of course not. You can't say where this is going. This is so reckless that it qualifies as suicidal. And maybe they are. But the rest of us aren't. But the most interesting fact of the speech was the emphasis. There was not a meaningful word for the entire duration about the things that actually matter to people who live here, like crime or inflation or fentanyl or the foreign army now occupying our country. Joe Biden doesn't care. There was no upside for you in any of the things that he said.
Right, on January 8th, 1790, less than a year into his first term, George Washington stood in front of a joint session of Congress in New York City and delivered what would be the first message to the United States Congress on the State of the Union. They didn't call it the State of the Union address then. They called it the first annual message to Congress, but this was the precursor to what we have today. And here he kicks it off. This is the first sentence. He said, "I embrace with great satisfaction the opportunity which now presents itself of congratulating you on the present favorable prospects of our public affairs." So he's like, we've gone through quite a bit, and now we have a favorable situation. We can move forward. And in the first session of Congress, we did some good stuff. But here he's going to follow up with some priorities that he's asking them to move on. He said the recent accession. So the first thing he gets to, the recent accession of the important state of North Carolina to the Constitution of the United States, of which official information has been received. So he's celebrating the fact that North Carolina decided to join the Union. And Dave Benner has an interesting short blog post on this. But Dave points out that during this time, the United States did not attempt to use coercion against the state of North Carolina. They did not view their status as an independent republic as a rebellion or raise an army to force its approval. Instead, Dave writes, peace and mutual friendship characterized the dealings between North Carolina and the United States. And it's very likely, at least my reading of this, Dave probably knows the history a little bit better than I do. But my reading of it, it was because of this peaceful relationship that encouraged North Carolina to get on board. And George Washington celebrated that right off the bat. So then Washington then goes on to outline his priorities. And the first thing that he talks about is national defense, but not in the way that anyone in modern times talks about it. The most important thing to George Washington was a well-armed, well-trained, well-disciplined population. We, the people, are the first line of defense. And here's how he put it. Among the many interesting objects which will engage your attention, that of providing for the common defense will merit particular regard. To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. So this is a general, a very famous general, saying like, just to be prepared for what might come will allow us to achieve our goal. Our goal, though, is peace. A free people, he said, ought not only to be armed, but disciplined, to which end a uniform and well-digested plan is requisite, and their safety and interest require that they should promote such manufactories as tend to render them independent of others for essential, particularly military supplies. He back to over here to Mount Vernon, back to George Washington's speech. They point out mountvernon.org. The president went on to outline what he saw as the republic's most important challenges. He argued pointedly that Congress should fund and support efforts to protect the interests of the United States in foreign affairs, He encouraged Congress to consider key domestic issues, including immigration, the establishment of a national currency, and a standard of weights and measures, and the establishment of a post office and a system of education. Now, this is a very common take. You'll find this type of view, especially because Mount Vernon is George Washington's estate, but it also has some, I would say, some misrepresentations, if I'm going to be generous here. Some of it I think is just false. First of all, he said nothing about immigration. The word immigration did not come up. Here's how he put it. Various considerations also render it expedient that the terms on which foreigners may be admitted to the rights of citizens should be speedily ascertained by a uniform rule of naturalization. And they did pass a Naturalization Act a while after this because he asked for it. And they're like, this is what we got to deal with. But he wasn't talking about immigration. He was talking about whether or not to naturalize as citizens foreigners who were already there. So that's an important point. Then he also said this: uniformity in the currency, weights, and measures of the United States is an object of great importance and will, I am persuaded, be duly attended to. Now, I could debate whether or not, maybe it's a semantics debate, whether or not George Washington was asking them to establish a national currency, but I'm not going to get too picky on that. But you might actually be interested in reading more about what happened after. On January 15th, just a week after this, Congress then requested Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson to draw up a plan for the uniformity of coins, weights, and measures of the United States. He submitted that to Congress in July of 1790. We did not get a Coinage Act until 1792. And then I would also disagree with the notion that Washington called for the establishment of a system of education. This is just false. He did not say we need to establish a national system of education under the control of Congress, and there's going to be a top-down control like what we have today in the Department of Education, because that's how it sounds. Now, those of us who've read his speech a number of times, and we know what really happened there, because this is just false. He did emphasize learning, education, knowledge, etc. He said knowledge in every country is the surest basis of public happiness. He said, to the security of a free constitution, it contributes in various ways. By convincing those who are entrusted with the public administration that every valuable end of government is best answered by the enlightened confidence of the people, and by teaching the people themselves to know and to value their own rights. So the more that people are educated on the structure of the Constitution and the structure of and what their rights are, where they come from, our natural rights, for example, the better things are going to be under a constitution. And ignorant people will never be free, as Thomas Jefferson put it. He said to discern and provide against invasions of their rights, to distinguish between oppression and the necessary exercise of lawful authority, between burdens proceeding from a disregard to their convenience and those resulting from the inevitable exigencies of society. So knowledge was very, very important. Learning was very important. He called specifically for, quote, the promotion of science and literature. He did not say we need to establish a national or a congressional-run education system. Instead, I think he basically deferred to Congress to think about the best way to promote and advance a knowledgeable population, which I guess could include saying, we're going to do nothing. He's saying, this is what I think we should consider, but it's up to you. Here's how he put it. Whether this desirable object will be best promoted by affording aids to seminaries of learning already established, by the institution of a national university, or by other expedients, will be well worthy of a place in the deliberations of the legislature.
Well, let's move on to the main thing we wanted to talk about. We had to talk about the speech, but this is something that really got under your skin a couple of days ago, and you wanted to save it for Friday. Our colleague Chris is out, so everyone's stuck with me as the sidekick. Chris is much smarter than I am. But move on actually to the main. Yeah, there we go. So you saw this and were upset about it yesterday, rightly so. California moves to expand zero-down, interest-free loan program to illegal immigrants. California.
Back to subsidizing something, you get more of it, right?
Yeah.
And but I read through it, and the justification why you shouldn't worry about it is not a real cost. It's just a loan. If they sell the house, they have to pay back the loan. And I thought, well, maybe that'll be 10 years. Maybe how are you going to work? How are you going to do the math and the regulation? But the other big thing is they decided because when they sell the house, the government's going to get back its loan. I said, yeah, like they got the student loans back.
Yeah.
The ones that are conscientious about it paid it back, and then they had to pay for the people who didn't pay it off, and then they're not going to. You know.
Yeah, I remember back in 07 and 08 when the housing crisis happened, and I wasn't doing that, so I only heard it from the periphery. But I remember you and Paul Martin and them working on this so hard, and it just seems like we've learned nothing. They've learned nothing. The fallacy that your house will always increase in value automatically, and you can just pay it off. I mean, they haven't learned a thing since 08.
But then they visualize that if you give everybody a house, loan them the money. There'll have to be some money exchanged, money out of one person's pocket to pay for the other, that it will circulate and increase the economy. So they think it's a real great stimulus. Well, when there's an announcement on a few of these loans made, it might stimulate government housing, for a week or two, but it's not a solution. It's mischief, and it's based on the principle of stealing from one person and giving it to another, because the people whose money this is are the people who do nothing suffer the consequences because they get taxed.
Yeah.
They have to pay the inflation tax. So it's just horrible. But that's the last thing they think about in Congress, I thought, was have the pros and cons on a piece of legislation based on a moral basis.
Yeah.
And they'll brag about the Constitution and other things, but most of the time, the most important thing, and I've said this before, the most important time is looking at the list who sponsors the bill, which lobbyist says this is a no yes vote, this is a no vote. That's the one that's the bottom line for a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just give a little bit of explanation of what the bill is, if you can put the next one on. It's Assembly Bill 1840 in the California State Assembly, and it would change existing law to allow illegal immigrants, maybe we should call them undocumented, to be eligible for the California Dream for All Fund, which provides interest-free loans for a down payment on first-time buyers. So basically, there's already a program that says, hey, want some money? Here's some money. Here's some free money. They just want to extend it. And here is the Democrat in the Assembly, Joaquin Arambula, and here's his rationale for introducing this bill. He wanted to ensure that qualified first-time homebuyers included undocumented applicants. So people that aren't allowed to be here, they can still have this. But, no.
Okay, I was just going to bring up another sentence from that article. It says the social and economic benefits of home ownership should be available to everyone.
Yeah.
That's good. Freedom should be available to everyone. He said, arguing that it's wrong to exclude people from the benefits of the California Dream for All Fund program just because they're illegal immigrants and they want to get their house built with stolen money that the government is a participant in. Yeah. And also, I wanted to add the illegal immigrants where the votes will come from.
Oh, yeah, you bet, yeah.
Well, but that's not polite to say that. Biden didn't mention that last night.
Here's some money and here's your voting registration. We filled out the form for you conveniently. Yeah. But I did want to point out one thing, though, because we're not just picking on Democrats. Both sides don't get it. And this jumped out at me in the article, Dr. Paul. I'm sure you saw it, too, if you can put this next one on. This is so typical of the Republican response to stupid Democrat things. If you can put that next one up. Now, this is Brian Dahl. He's a Republican Assembly member in California. Here's what he said. Assembly Bill 1840 is an insult to California citizens who are being left behind and priced out of home ownership. I'm all for helping first-time home buyers, but give priority for those who are here in our state legally. In other words, he's saying, I'm all for stealing money to give it to people, but you should do it the Republican way.
As long as we can designate who we're bribing for the next vote. No, it's criminal, and that's why the non-aggression principle is so important, that if you can't do it on a personal level, you can't go and steal somebody's house or their cars or anything, but you can always send a member of Congress to vote a certain way, and all of a sudden, they're good people, they're moral people, they care about their neighbors. But of course, if you look at Venezuela and seen what happened there, and Zimbabwe, it doesn't work. But it's happening here. The consequence, you can't divorce and excuse what we see in our big cities now with crime, because all that stuff is built on crime. This will stir up some resentment, but the government's involved in criminal activity. Well, the whole idea, we don't have the money, but no sweat, they're still taking it. We'll print the money, we're counterfeiters, and they don't care. So it's all built on illusion, and they don't even, I don't know, they must delude themselves, that nothing could happen. But there's no record on history where there's some of the fiat currency stuff has lasted a long time, but it eventually gets caught up, and it leads to suffering, and it usually ends up in war too.
The thing that gets me about this Republican response, and we're not picking on him because I'm sure if you surveyed all of them, they don't believe in the free market. The free market determines those who are eligible to buy a home. If you interfere with that market, you'll have people in a home that they can't afford, and then they'll lose the home and lose everything with it. Republicans, as this assemblyman, fundamentally don't believe in the free market. And what's ironic is people like him, and I'm not picking on him, but others like him, they would be the first to scream and rant about these socialist hellholes like Venezuela. But people like him are just every bit as socialist as the leaders of Venezuela. They don't believe fundamentally that markets make choices, and they will tell you what you can and can't do. I'd love to live in $1 million house. I can't afford it. The market's telling me I don't have enough money. And so it's terrible to see Republicans just as socialist as Democrats.
All this nonsense is going to come to an end, and bits and pieces every day we see it. So if they can take a monetary system that when they inherited or took it away from the private sources, so to speak, and gold is $20 an ounce, and now it's over $2,000 an ounce. People must wake up and say, well, how does that work? Who gets all these benefits? Well, the first group that gets the benefit is the government, because they get to spend it. And then the second people to get it are the financiers and the big corporations. And the last people to get it are the people that, didn't get it. They got a pay raise, but it never even came close to the cost of living increases. And they get stuck with it. And they say, well, is those people gouging us? No, it's the politicians and the bureaucrats who believe in this system, and they believe that inflation, destruction of the currency, is a good way, to take care of the poor, which is a bunch of lies. And someday we have to expose them on that, and more people know today there's something wrong. So far, there's too many people blaming the wrong thing, and that's why I think economic education is so important, and why I highly recommend that people get engaged in studying Austrian free market economics. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.